Hello friends, welcome to the Southern Mountain Kitchen. Today we're making shredded chicken and gravy. So this recipe is really easy to do, but it's really great if you're trying to work on a budget and stretch the food you have to where, you can feed more people out of less. Because basically, once you make the chicken and the gravy here, and you only need like a couple of breasts, or if you have a larger family, you might want to throw a third breast in there. But you're going to serve this over something like mashed potatoes or rice. And if you throw a vegetable beside it, you have a meal. And being that there's gravy and chicken that's already shredded up and it's really a lot, you can spread it out over like several plates and it actually will go quite a ways. And you have a decent amount of food for everyone to eat. And you can even throw some bread with this or whatever. And it's just a really quick and easy meal to make, but it's enough for everybody to eat. So let's get started with our recipe. So we're going to go ahead and take 2 chicken breasts and we're going to cut the fat off because unfortunately it seems here recently every time I buy chicken there is extra fat on it for some reason. And we're going to go ahead and just make sure that we get off all of the hard parts, anything that's a little rough or around the edges where there's that one corner that is always a little tough. Get rid of it, put it to the side. And then we're going to take our chicken and cut it into strips. Now they don't have to be particularly thin, but they can be decently thin. Because when we're going to put these in later, we're going to cook them in the gravy. And the thinner the better for cooking. So just get them completely cut up into strips. And then we will move on to the next step. So we're going to take our chicken and put it in a bowl after it's cut up, and we're going to season it. And once it's all in there completely, we are going to add to this 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, and 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder. And this is going to give the chicken its own flavor before it even hits the gravy. And once we have that completely done, we're going to go ahead and stir that up to make sure the seasoning goes through all of the chicken, because you want to make sure that it's evenly distributed before you go on to the next step, because this way at least when it starts cooking the flavor will be held into each piece, not just some of them. And once we get this done, we're going to move on. You're going to need a large skillet to start this in. And we're going to put that on our stove on at least medium to high heat, in which we're going to add to this about 2-3 tablespoons of olive oil and then at least 3 tablespoons of butter, because we're going to mix this butter up with the olive oil, get it melted before we do anything else to this, so that way it's ready for the next step. So it might take a minute to melt your butter, but go ahead and move it around the pan. I find it's easier just to move it around and it actually helps it melt. And once we get this completely melted, we're going to add some flour to it, because this is going to be the beginning step of making the gravy. Now, this isn't going to be like so much traditional gravy, because a lot of times you put your flour in there and you mix it up and it's really oily, really greasy, and it cooks the taste of the flour out, but you don't have to have it that oily to get that taste out, because we're going to do it with the butter and the olive oil. And as we're cooking it, we're going to do this for like a couple minutes to actually cook it through. And it's going to be kind of pasty and dry, but as we add in our chicken broth, it's going to actually release that and make it move through, mix through to where it actually becomes more fluid. And then as we add all of the chicken broth, then we're going to be in business for having gravy. So anyway, so in the pan, we've added at least between 3 to 4 tablespoons of flour, and we're going to mix this through with the oil and the butter and just get it mixed together to where it's not dry anymore. So you're going to have to move this around with your spatula, move it back and forth until you get it actually mixed together thoroughly. And if you have to, if you have a spatula like what I'm doing here, just move it over top of it and move it over the pan to a point to where you can see that it is mixing through. Now when we get to the chicken broth, we're going to use at least 2 cups of it, but we're not putting it all in at once. We're going to put in a little bit and mix with this to actually loosen up this flour a little bit and make it a little bit more fluid. And then we're going to add a little more and a little more until we actually get it completely mixed through. and that way it'll start incorporating. So I'm just going to put in just a little bit right here, and I'm going to start mixing this, because this way I'm just going to do it until I'm breaking up the flour and the butter and the oil and making it liquidy. And it's going to take a few times before it gets there. So once you've mixed that through, go ahead and add more. But the whole point is just to add a bit at a time and not pour the whole container in, because if you put the 2 cups in there, it's going to be really hard to break this up and actually make it smooth. So doing it the way I'm doing it, you're literally breaking it up a little at a time to a point where you can control what you're mixing. Because if you put 2 whole cups in there, this stuff is just going to float around. You're not going to be able to get a hold of it to break it up. But there's a little method to my madness. It does work in the end. And the good thing is as you're mixing this, you know, it's thinning out, it's working really well. And each time you put more in, it does a lot better. And you can add more to it. If you have lumps in yours, don't worry about it. They're going to cook out eventually. Because by the time we get the gravy made, then we put the chicken in, and then it cooks, because this is going to be in with the chicken for at least 15 minutes. It's going to cook out anything in there that is a little lumpy, but you want to go ahead and try to break it up as much as you can as you go along, because as you see, mine is starting to incorporate and break up as it's going, because it's a lot more wet in there now. Just a reminder, just keep with your spatula moving all over the pan and breaking it up and stirring, because that's the best way to actually get all of this incorporated. And once you get to a point where you feel good that you've broken up most of the larger lumps of this, then you can go ahead and add more of the chicken broth into it. See, at this point I went ahead and added all that I had, so that's the whole 2 cups in there now. And just basically, this is a point to stir it until you can get it to a reasonable thickness. Now, this is going to actually cook and thicken up as it goes. So as you're stirring, you're not only breaking up any lumps you have in here, but you're also helping it to mix together as it's thickening up. And it's going to take a few minutes for it to thicken. It could take probably, 3, 4, 5 minutes, depending on how hot your stove is at that point. So we're going to add some seasoning to it, because you need to do this. So we need a half a teaspoon of salt, a half teaspoon of pepper, a half a teaspoon of oregano, and a half a teaspoon of poultry seasoning. And once they're all in there, we're going to add into that 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, and then we're going to go ahead and mix again. And that's a lot of seasoning in there, but it's also a lot of flavor, because it's going to make this gravy really great. And as you mix it up, you're going to see that the color is going to change a little bit, because the paprika is going to really work the gravy and change the way it looks, but it's also going to give it a really great taste, because the mix of all of this together, it just punches up the gravy. It's not boring anymore. It has flavor. And if you're putting this over top of mashed potatoes or rice or whatever, you want something with a little bit of a kick to it, so everything's not really bland, and this is not bland. It's not overly spicy either, but it has such a great taste to it. It's just gonna be one of these things. It's really a pleasure to eat it, because it has flavor. Because I've had a lot of food before where I'm like, it's really boring and I didn't want to finish it. This, you don't have that problem. So once you get this all mixed up, we're gonna take our chicken and place it into the pan and just put the strips side by side. The whole goal in this is to make sure they're flat in there, and then as the liquid gets up around them, you're trying to cover as much of the chicken with the liquid as possible. So you're going to see like over half of your chicken is in the fluid as you're putting it in here, and that way that keeps it coated, because as it cooks, you want it to be, kind of underneath of the liquid level of the gravy. And once you get it all in there, you're going to cover it and let it cook for 15 minutes. But along the way, you want to turn these to make sure that it's cooking evenly, like top and bottom. So you're going to do this like maybe once or twice. It's no big deal. Just keep turning them as they cook. So that way we know that these are cooked completely through. And if you were checking it with a thermometer and you're cooking chicken breasts, it usually has to reach a temperature of like 165 to be thoroughly cooked. But go ahead and flip it. A couple of times of flipping and cooking, you're going to hit that temperature, especially when you have this bubbly like this. It is definitely cooking that chicken. but I always try to turn it like 2-3 times just to make sure. It's like maybe if you came in and did it every like 3 or 4 minutes, you'd probably be in really good shape on this, just to make sure that both sides really get coated with the liquid and it cooks through. Then we're going to remove the chicken, bring it to a cutting board, and we're just going to shred it up a bit. We're not going for like mega shredding here. We're just trying to cut it into little bits and pieces. Because when you shred this up, you'll be amazed how much chicken you actually have. Because this is just a little bit of my chicken. This isn't all of it. And when I bring it out, like bit by bit, I try to like leave some room on the cutting board to actually cut it all up. Really don't want to lose any of this by falling off the side of the board. But just go ahead, take a fork, take a knife, slice through it. It's really easy to do. And as you shred it up, just push it to the side until you bring out more pieces and get the rest of it shredded. And as you can see, it's really easy to cut this because this makes it really tender when you're cooking it this time in the gravy like this, because it's helping to basically tenderize it. And when I'm done, this is what I get. This is a lot of chicken. So like I said, you can feed a few people with this because it is quite a lot. Plus the fact when you're putting this on top of like mashed potatoes, rice, whatever, and the gravy, there's a lot. And with the vegetable, that's what I did here. So I did mine with mashed potatoes. It's really easy. You can see here that, you know, with some broccoli, green beans, whatever you want to put with it, it's going to be great. And you just stack this onto the plate until you get something like this, and you have such an amazing meal because this has such a great taste. You got vegetables, you got mashed potatoes, you got chicken, you got gravy, and like I said, you can throw some bread in with this and you have a good meal, and it really doesn't cost that much to make, and this is a great budget meal. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and if you get a chance, check out my cookbooks, which are available in bookstores worldwide. The first is about everyday cooking, the second is all about baking. Have a great day.